Go now to the next book of Mukhtasar Tibyan fi Adab Hamalat al-Qur'an of Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah. And we're still discussing the manners of the student as we took the manners of the teacher already. And this is important. Why? Because the latter part of the book, or the second half of the book, is where he talks about the rulings of how to deal with the Qur'an. And it's a must for us to understand that the one who wants to gain knowledge and wants to gain knowledge of the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, he must have adab. He must have manners. So he says, based upon this, he should look at his teacher with respect, think of him as being completely competent, and that he is better than his contemporaries. Now, as I mentioned before, from the rights of the student upon the teacher is that he respects his teacher, that he shows respect to his teacher and he honors him, because the teacher is at the level of the father. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا أَنَا لَكُمْ بِمَنْزَلَةِ الْوَالِدِ أُعَلِّمُكُمْ. I am for you at the status of a father that teaches you, that I am teaching you. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا. He is not from us the one who doesn't have mercy towards the youngs amongst us. وَيَعْرِفْ شَرَفْ كَبِيرُنَا. He doesn't know the honor and respect of the elders amongst us. Now, I'm going to read some statements of Imam al-Sa'di. You could say al-Sa'di or you could say Sa'di. There's no problem with either one. So I want you to say a mistake was said in pronouncing it. Imam al-Sa'di said, it is befitting for the students to respect his teacher, have manners with him, due to his general and specific right. So the teacher has a general right, right am, and the right khas. As for the general right that the teacher has, then that is because the teacher of good has prepared himself and is benefiting the creation. He has prepared himself and is benefiting the creation. Thus his right upon them is obligated due to him teaching them that which they are ignorant of, and directs them to every good, and warns them from every evil, and occurs by way of him from spreading the religion and the continuing for those present and those who will come after them. And this benefit, there is nothing similar to it in ihsan. This is from the good of the teacher, that he benefits. This is the general right. As for the specific right, why he has a specific right, then that is because he has put forth in teaching him, the student. He is eager upon directing him and reaching him to the highest of levels, for he has put forth his time and thoughts to try to make him understand, to make the student benefit, and is patient upon that his soul finds ease and comfort with. If it was him directing you in affairs of dunya, if your teacher was directing you in affairs of dunya, and he was good towards you in the worldly life, then it will necessitate for you to give him his rights. Then what about the rights when it comes to him benefiting you and directing you in regards to your deen, and giving you beneficial knowledge, and that remains with the beneficial knowledge is greater. Also, it comes to the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, that they used to have awe of their teachers. They used to have respect for their teachers. And they weren't people that were disrespectful to their teachers. We mentioned last week that Abdurrahman ibn Awf's son, radiallahu anhu, he said he was deprived of much knowledge from Ibn Abbas. Why? Because he used to argue with him. He used to argue with him. It comes from Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu. He said, I intended to ask Umar radiallahu anhu about those two ladies who backed each other against Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, I intend to ask for 1 whole year. I was seeking the opportunity to ask this question, but in vain due to awe of him. I wasn't able to do so out of my great respect for him, until once I accompanied him for Hajj, and then he asked him the question. Shu'ba Amir al-Mu'mineen fil Hadith, he said, everyone I heard a narration from, then I am a slave to him. Then I am a slave to him. What he intends is that he is humble and respectful towards him, and he honors him. That he respects him, and he is humble towards him, and he honors him. As-Sakhawi, from the students of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says, there is no doubt that the teacher is at the level of the father, and even greater. Honoring him is from honoring knowledge. The people are by their teachers. If the teachers are gone, then who will they live with? Who will they live amongst? If the teachers are gone, and the scholars are gone, then who are you going to live amongst? And they say that what this means is if the scholars, they go, then the people live amongst the ignorant ones, and the foolish ones, and the people of innovation, and those who are losers and time wasters. And those who are losers and time wasters. Inna Allah la yantazi al-ilm intiza'an. Allah does not snatch away knowledge all at once. وَلَكِنْ يَنْتَزِعُهُ بِقَبْلِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Allah snatched away this knowledge by the death of the scholars. حَتَّى لَمْ يَبْقِ عَالِمًا. Until a scholar doesn't remain, what happens? اتَّخَذَ النَّاسُ رُؤُسًا جُهَالًا. The people, they take their leaders as the ignorant ones, فَسُئِلُوا فَأَفْتُوا بِغَيْرِ الْعِلْمِ فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. They ask these people questions, they misguide themselves and misguide others. So if your teacher is upon khair, and he is Salafi, and he is someone that has some kind of knowledge, then you show respect to them. For if he's not around, then who are you going to be sitting amongst? If he's not around, and he's not there no more, who will you be sitting with? You'll be sitting with people that are not going to benefit you, is what he's intending here. Then he says here, or this is important for a student, that he has good thoughts of his teacher. That he has good thoughts of his teacher. They say from a means of being deprived of your teacher's knowledge is having bad thoughts about the teacher. Why is that? Because if you feel your teacher is not fit to teach, or your teacher doesn't have no knowledge, how can you benefit from him then? How can you really benefit from him? If everything he says, you think about it twice, I don't know if it's true or not, I don't know if it's right, how can you benefit from that kind of individual? If you're always doubting what he's saying to you, you're never going to benefit. For that reason, Imam Muqbil, Abdullah, she mentioned, as you mentioned, most of this sharh is from Abdullah's book. Here's her explanation of it, the daughter of Imam Muqbil. She says, once Imam Muqbil asked some students some questions, and he found them very shaky regarding it. He said to them, Imam Muqbil said to them, what is wrong with you? Perhaps you don't trust your teacher. The one who doesn't trust his teacher will not benefit. The one who does not trust his teacher will not benefit. Take that as a principle. If you do not trust your teacher, you are not going to benefit. If you're always doubting what your teacher says, then know 100%, you're going to go 10 years down the line studying with that teacher, you won't benefit much. You won't benefit much. Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen mentioned from the most important manners of the student of knowledge that he considers his teacher a teacher. He considers his teacher a teacher who has given him knowledge and trying to nurture him upon manners. The student, if he does not trust his teacher in these two affairs, then he won't benefit from him the desired benefit. If he has doubt regarding his knowledge, then how will he benefit? Every time he hears from the shaykh, he won't accept it until he asks someone else and he researches. And this is where you deprive yourself of khair. You deprive yourself, and he says this is a mistake in respect from one angle and a mistake in dealing with him from another angle. So in both ways, you're losing. Now that doesn't mean that you blind follow the teacher. We're not calling anyone to blind follow anyone. That doesn't mean you blind follow the scholars, you blind follow a teacher. But if you're going to research an affair and you think the correct stance is not what your teacher said, then dealing with that is by way of with respect. You don't go to your teacher and say, you said a statement and I don't think it's right. Your statement is wrong and the evidence you're using is weak and this way you said is wrong and this way you said is this. That's not the way you do with the teacher. You go with them in a respectful way. You disagree with them with respect and honor. But you don't disrespect them and say, you know what, I know better than you on this. And that kind of arrogance, in reality, when a student gets like that, is when that student starts to fall off because the barakah of his knowledge disappears. Why? Because now he's showing arrogance. He's showing arrogance. At times you find that you think a stance is correct, and when you research it more, you find that your teacher's stance was actually the correct stance. Why? Because there's principles he's applying. There's sciences that he's applying. There's different affairs. He's looking at it from different angles. You, because you're new to it or you're ignorant, you're looking at something from one or two angles. He's looked at it from 10 different angles. Look at the books of Shaykh al-Islam and Taymiyyah or Ibn Qayyim. At times they attack an affair with 40 different angles. Are you going to go now and say Shaykh al-Islam didn't know what he was talking about? You find this sometimes. Someone who just started practicing or started learning, Shaykh al-Islam, he says this statement, but I say this statement. Who are you to say, you say this and Shaykh al-Islam says that? Shaykh al-Islam is looking at an affair from 20 different angles, 30 different angles, knows Arabic language, knows science of hadith, knows usul al-fiqh, knows usul al-tafsir. You don't even know Arabic probably, you're going to say, no, I don't agree with Shaykh al-Islam to me a stance because you know what, this stance is stronger. When you get to that kind of opinion and start thinking like that about yourself, no, the barakah starts to leave you because you have arrogance in your heart. You have arrogance in your heart and you think your statement has a weight. Your statement has no weight until you've actually studied and put in effort and studied knowledge correctly. And that's why you find some of the young people nowadays. In some of these other places you find them and you're to try to advise them. You say, Shaykh bin Baz, he says this. And Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen, he says this. And he replies and he says, you know what? But this student that someone said Medina told me this. Shaykh bin Baz and Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen say this. And some student that you don't even know if he benefited in Medina University says this. This is aib for someone to have his true reliance or to have his trust in a student and leave off the statements of the scholars. The scholars, they're the ones that we go back to their statements. And then he says, I should come to the class in a complete form, in a clean state, as we mentioned in regards to the teacher, clean using the siwak, freeing the heart from affairs that will occupy him. This is recommended to come to class like this, and using siwak in a general evidence is good to use siwak at all times. And he should not enter without seeking permission. He should not enter without seeking permission, except if the teacher is in a place where permission is not sought. If the teacher is in a masjid, for example, you don't have to seek permission. You come into the masjid, you pray tahiyatul masjid, and you sit down in a place, as we're going to discuss further. But if, for example, the class is in his house, or the class is in a private space, then you must seek permission. Then you must seek permission to enter and to seek knowledge there. Allah says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَدْخُلُوا بُيُوتًا غَيْرَ بُيُوتِكُمْ حَتَّى تَسْتَأْنِسُوا وَتُسَلِّمُوا عَلَى أَهْلِهَا. do not, O you believe, do not enter the houses other than your houses حتى تستأنسوا أي حتى تستأذنوا, until you seek permission. وتسلموا على أهلها, and you give salam. Now, someone may think that you ask permission first and then you give salam. No, you give salam first and then you ask permission. Because al-waw, if you've learned Arabic language, some of you have learned al-mutammima, mashallah, al-waw doesn't necessitate order. It's not like thumma. It doesn't necessitate order. So first you give salam and then you seek permission. Where's the proof for that? It comes the hadith of the Prophet in Sunnah Abi Dawud, that a man from Banu Amir, he relayed to me, or he says, Rib'iyan, he said that a man from Banu Amir relayed to me that he was home, or they went to seek permission from the Prophet ﷺ whilst he was home, and he said, can I enter? He just said like that, can I enter? So the Prophet said to his servant, go out to this man and teach him how to seek permission. And he said to him, say, Assalamu alaikum, can I enter? Say, Assalamu alaikum, can I enter? So from this we get the proper way to seek permission is you give salam first and then you say, can I enter? Then you say, can I enter? But as you mentioned, if he's in the masjid, you don't have to seek permission. You come into the class, unless it's a private class. Unless it's a private class and you're new and you're not at that level, then before you enter that kind of class, you should seek permission from the teacher. And permission is not sought during the class. In that kind of case, you seek permission before the class. You don't bother the teacher, you don't annoy him, and go to him during the class and say, can I join the class? No, you go beforehand. Shaykh Hussein Al-Hatibi, from the Mashaykh of Yemen, he mentioned that some students, what they do is when they come to the sittings of knowledge in the masajid, they come and seek permission. He says there's no proof for that. So a general sitting like this, they say they come into the masjid and they seek permission, can I sit? There's no proof for that. But for this, rather, it may cause annoyance to the teacher if you do so. But if he's a new student, and this is not the place for seeking, if he's a new student, he's not at that level, then you can seek permission if it's a private class. Also, seeking permission is done 3 times. Seeking permission is done 3 times. If they don't answer within 3 times and accept your appeal for entering, then you leave. Then you leave. So seeking permission has its own chapter, and it's upon us to learn how to seek permission. Then he says, you should give salam to those present if he enters, and specify the teacher with extra statements of appreciation and love. Shaykh Al-Uthaymi mentioned this is correct. But if it is going to cause annoyance or confusion, for example, during the sitting, then do we say that you still give salam? Like let's say it's a sitting like this, someone comes and says Assalamu alaikum loudly in front of everyone, then this may cause some kind of annoyance or may disturb some of the students that are listening. So in this case, some of the scholars say there's no problem with it. Why? Because the sitting of the Prophet, they would come into the sitting while he was teaching and they would give salams. Another benefit that's mentioned here is that when we talk about specifying the teacher with extra salams, doesn't mean you come and you say Assalamu alaikum and then you say to the teacher Assalamu alaikum. What that means is you say Assalamu alaikum to everyone, but then you go ask the teacher, how are you doing? How's your affairs? That's what's intended here by an-Nawawi. Doesn't mean you give the people salam and then you give a special salam to the teacher. You give a special salam to the teacher. Some of the people, like some of the Sufis in them, none of them, they actually believe this, that you give the salams and then you give the teacher a real special salam where you hug him and you kiss his hand and you do all stuff. No. Rather, what is intended here, you give salam and you enter with that salam and then you ask the teacher of a situation, how he's doing, if he needs anything, and you show up extra appreciation and love to him. Then he says, when one is leaving, he gives salams and doesn't step over the people's shoulders and he sits wherever he finds a spot. Or before that, when he enters and he gives salams, he tries to find a place to sit and he doesn't step over the shoulders of the people and he sits wherever he finds a spot. And this is from the manners that's mentioned from the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith of Abu Waqid al-Laythi radiallahu anh, that the Messenger ﷺ was sitting in the mosque one day with some people and 3 men they came in. 2 of them came in front of Allah's Messenger ﷺ and the 3rd one went away. So the 2 persons, they kept standing before the Messenger of Allah ﷺ for a while, and then one of them found a place in the circle and he sat there. And the second one, he couldn't find a place, so he sat behind. And as for the 3rd one, he went away. The scholars use hadith as evidence that this shows that the student, when he enters into a sitting, he tries to look for an open spot. He tries to look for an open spot and he sits there without bothering anyone, going over people's shoulders, and like that. He sits there. And what is intended by sitting behind, if you go to the Haramain, you'll find that the sitting is a circle. And you'll find some sitting in the back behind the teacher and some sitting in front. That's what's intended here. Obviously here, it's not possible. But you'll find in those kind of sittings, it's possible someone is sitting behind. If he finds a spot there, he sits. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned some benefits deprived from this narration. Number one, the recommendation of making the sittings of Naj and remembrance in a circle. Now this hadith shows is that the sittings of Naj should be in a circle. Number two, if someone proceeds to a spot, he has the most right to it. If someone proceeds or goes first to a spot, he has the most right to it. Number three, the recommendation to have manners in the sittings of Naj and to fill open spots. This is an important point here, to fill open spots. We'll mention from Shaykh Al-Albani soon. Number four, the permissibility to walk towards an open spot so long as he won't cause harm and annoyance. If it is fear that he's going to cause harm or annoyance, he sits wherever he finds a spot. Like the second one did, he sat in the back. Now generally in the sittings of Naj, the areas should be closed. People should sit close to each other. It shouldn't be where it's wide open. Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah mentioned this. He says the sitting of the people today in the sittings of knowledge is mutafarriqeen fil masjid. That they're all over the place, split up in the masajid. غير متحلقين. They're not in a circle. Then he says, this is from shaitan. He says, فَيَنْبَغِي عَلَى طَلَبَةِ الْعِلْمِ التَّحَلُّقِ فِي مَجَالِسِ الْعِلْمِ. It's befitting for the Sunnah Naj to encircle in the sitting of Naj. And the proof of that is the hadith of Jabir radiallahu anh, that the Prophet came out one day to them, and he seen them sitting in different groups. He said, مَا لِي أَرَاكُمْ عِزِينَ. Why is it that I see you guys all split up in different groups? Why is it that I see you all split up in different groups? Showing us that the sittings of Naj should be close to one another, sitting one another. And this shows that if the hearts are close to one another, then they'll sit to, the bodies get close to one another. But if the hearts are split, you'll find that generally the bodies is split as well. This is another evidence that Shaykh Al-Albani used based on another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, if you find a place to sit, you sit there. But you shouldn't try to go over the shoulder of the people. And that is based upon a knowledge of the hadith of where the Prophet mentioned on Jum'ah that a man came and stepped over people. A man came and stepped over the people while the Prophet was given the khutbah on Friday. The Prophet said, sit down, فَقَدْ آذَيْتَ. Sit down, for indeed you cause an annoyance. The same goes to the sittings of Naj, that you don't do so. Rather, you find a place to sit, you sit. Now, another mistake that Shaykh Hussein Al-Hatibi mentioned that people make is that they enter sometimes the class and they pray Tahiyat al-Masjid right in front of the teacher. So they say they enter and they pray Tahiyat al-Masjid like in an open space like this. He says this is a mistake. You pray Tahiyat al-Masjid in the back. Why? Because you praying may cause an annoyance or disturbance. Up and down, the student, they can't pay attention. So you pray in the back, then you come into the sitting of knowledge. Now, if the teacher permits him to move forward, then he should do so. Sometimes there are certain students that a teacher will tell permit move forward. You'll find this also if you go to the cities of knowledge in Saudi Arabia and them, you'll find that there's a person that reads to the shaykh. That kind of person, if he comes late, obviously the teacher is going to tell him move forward because the wisdom behind it that he comes and he reads to the teacher. Also, it may be other reasons due to honor and respect for that specific individual that comes in, that you try to honor him as a guest or like that, and you tell him to come forward. Also, if the person you're telling to come forward, for example, he's the one who reads to the shaykh or the shaykh asks a question at times, then it's beneficial at that time. Now, the students at times, they show approval of that. And how do they show approval? They know from the teacher's affair is that he would give this permission, then they give permission as well. Also, then he mentions here that you should not tell someone to get off from their seat. You should not ask someone to move from their spot for you to sit in that spot. It comes the hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu anh, that a man should not ask another man to get up from his place in order to take his seat. But you should make room for one another and spread out. You shouldn't make someone get up from his spot just because you want that spot. That's not from good manners. Also, the previous narration of the three men entering is as evidence as well. How's an evidence? How's an evidence that you don't get someone to move from the spot? How's the one of the three men that entered in evidence that you do not get someone to move from their spot? Anyone know? The second guy couldn't find a spot. Where did he sit? He sat in the back. So they say Ibn Battali says this is evidence that from good manners that a man sits wherever he finds a spot and does not make someone get up from his spot, and he uses evidence, the narration of the three men that entered. The second one couldn't find a spot. He didn't tell someone to get up or move over and let me sit. Rather, he found a spot in the back and he sat down. As for if you see two people sitting together, then you don't split between them. It comes from Nabi Dawood that none of you should sit between two men except with their permission. If they're sitting together close by, you shouldn't make them split unless you seek permission from them. And if you sit between them, they say that you gather yourself. What does that mean? Some people, when you ask permission to sit, if they could sit between you, they open their legs up wide, they put their bag beside them and the other stuff beside them, and they annoy you and bother you. If you're going to ask to sit between two people, then do so, sit there if they give you permission, but gather yourself. Then he mentions here, if a person is going to leave the sitting, then he gives salams as well. When he leaves the sitting, he gives salam. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentions, إِذَا أَنْتَهَا أَحَدُكُمْ إِلَى مَجْلِسٍ فَلْيُسَلِّمْ. If one of you goes to a sitting, give salam. فَإِنْ بَدَى لَهُ أَنْ يَجْلِسْ فَلْيَجْلِسْ. If he sees that he can sit down, let him sit down. ثُمَّ إِذَا قَامَ فَلْيُسَلِّمْ فَلَيْسَتِ الْأُولَى بِأَحَقٍّ مِنَ الْآخِرَةِ. Then if he's going to leave, let him give salam, for the first one doesn't have more right than the second one. Shaykh al-Uthaymeen mentions a great benefit regarding this hadith, that this shows the completeness of the legislation of Islam. That the beginning entering and the ending entering is all the same, as the same affair. The same way you don't wear your right shoe and walk without the left shoe, you give both of them the same right. You wear your left shoe and your right shoe and then you walk. Islam is a religion of order. A religion of order. So you came in, you give salam, and when you exit, you give salams. Now, Shaykh Hussein al-Hatibi mentioned the benefit that some people when they leave, they say ma'as salam, with salam. He said this is no evidence for this. Also, some of them say what's even worse and more repulsive, they say bye to you. This is even more repulsive. For example, in our culture, they say the Khudai Paman, for example. And this Khudai is not even Allah's name. It's not even Allah's name. You cannot use it for Allah's name. They say other statements like that. Rather, what you should say is As-salam alaikum. As-salam alaikum. You shouldn't say these other statements that are mentioned by these people. You say As-salam alaikum. And if you want to make it more, you say As-salam alaikum wa rahmatullah, or As-salam alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Also, some people, they say until the next meeting. Until our next meeting, there's no evidence for that either. Rather, you should say As-salam alaikum. There's barakah in that. And it is from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The last point he mentions here is that he says, he relates from Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. From the right of the scholar upon you is that you give the people in general salams, but single him out with greetings to the exclusion of the rest. You should sit in front of him, not indicate him with your hand, not wink, nor say to him, so and so is contrary to your statement. Not backbite anyone amongst him. No private talk in his sitting, nor grab him by his clothing, nor insist upon him if he is lazy. Nor should you turn away from him and feel fed up due to accompanying him for long. And upon the student is to defend his teacher in his absence, if able, and if he's not able to do so, he leaves that sitting. If you're not able to defend your teacher, and people are talking bad about you, leave that sitting. Although this narration is weak, in it is gathered much of the manners of the student of knowledge. In it is gathered much of the manners of the student of knowledge, although it is weak, the meanings that are mentioned in it are correct. We'll stop with this much. If there's any quick question, no take now. If not, continue next week. Yes, Omar. Allah Hafiz also is well known in the Indo-Pak community. May Allah preserve you is what it means. Nonetheless, a statement like that is not as-salam.